see that we all set by agency, right? That's typical. The first one we did last month, the same thing happened. We actually toyed with the idea to have assigned seating like a movie theater. Bill, with a bunch of practitioners, you guys would sit down wherever you want to anyways. So we kind of tossed that idea out. So welcome to UTEP. My name is Manjarrez. I'm the project director for the Center for Law and Human Behavior. I am the principal investigator for this project. And this project is actually funded by the Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology Office of University Program, through the Center for Borders, Trade, and Immigration Research. The intent of this project is that we will provide members of the Homeland Security Enterprise practitioners symposiums that are relative to your job duties. And the things that maybe you're doing that are relative now, maybe things that are emerging on that. But the idea is to kind of bring research closer to what you're doing. On that, most of you may have known I retired from government service. When I was sitting in the office there with the Border Patrol, I always wondered what was out there. I mean, we never took advantage of what institutions of higher education were doing. And if they weren't practitioners, they do a lot of research on that. So when I got here, I thought, man, we need to be able to take advantage of that somehow. On that. So this is one of the reasons why we have a symposium series. Is I look for research that's relevant, maybe that is of topical interest to you all, and I seek the researchers out there and put that together. So this is the second of a series that we're going to do. We've been funded for 9 of them. So it'll still look through June 30th, 2017. And the next one we have in June, and after that they're every 2 months. Now, these first 2 topics came about through a group that I put together, and it's the Homeland Security Symposium Advisory Board. So we meet once a month here at UTEP. They're comprised of members from ICE HSI, ICE ERO, Border Patrol, OFO, TSA, the El Paso PD, and the El Paso Sheriff's Office. And so bring up topical things. He goes, hey, what do you think? Are these of any interest? And he said, no, that's not of interest. We're really interested in this. And once we find that out, we grab hold to it, and I seek out researchers to do that. On that. So you may have noticed there's no cost to this. It's because the HS is funding everything relative to this on no deal. So it's a from 9 to 1. I apologize for running a little bit late, and I was waiting for maybe some of the last ones that were showing up on the deal. But we're going to start that up. There's a couple of things that I had to point out, and you saw the signs up there. The building folks won't allow food and drink in here. I apologize for that. On that. The breaks are a little bit longer on the deal for that purpose. So, during the break, if you want to grab some, you can. It has to be out there. You can't bring it in here. They won't allow that. And then you probably saw in your packets. Who looked through your packets? Who has looked through that packets? Did you notice something in there that you didn't expect? A pre and post test on the deal. There's one of the requirements from DHS to us on that is how do you measure learning on that. So. We established a pre-test and a post-test on that. So I'm going to give you a few minutes in a little bit to do the pre-test, and then at the end we'll give you some time to do the post-test. And we compare the learning curve on that in terms of the items. Second on there, you see an exit survey in your packet on that. There's nothing that's mandatory about those, but I would highly encourage you to submit those, to be very honest. If you liked it, great. If you didn't like it, put that on there. Tell me why, if you can. But even more important, there's an area, I think it's question 5 in that survey, that asks, are there any topics of interest to you? So put those on there. If you see something that, man, I really would like to know about that, put those in there. Because when my next advisory board meeting, I said, hey, in the last symposium, this is what your people asked for. And they say, hey, that's a great topic. And we start looking to find the research to be able to do that. Because it's got to be a benefit to you. If it's not a benefit to you, then we're all wasting our time. And the idea is to provide something that is of value to you. So I asked at the end to do the exit surveys. For the El Paso PD and the UTEP PD, service man, we have the T-code stuff ready. So we're ready, we'll hand it to you. We'll give you the package, do your signatures, and get that to your training officer, but they're all prepped and ready to go on that day. So, when you get these in the future, the flyers announcing the symposium, I encourage you, forward to many people as you may benefit from this on the topics. I will tell you, we didn't have a flyer ready yet. The topic for June 23rd, which is the next symposium, is DNA analysis on poly. Now, you may ask, what do I care about that? It has implications on evidence. Think of bulk cash, think of tariffs, think of trade and travel, think of evidence collection, set teams like that on that. So we're going to have some people coming in for it. So once I have that, I'll put that out, and I encourage you, if you think it's applicable to you, RSVP. If you know someone, send it to them.
So today we're going to be talking, I'm going to start, I got, the really cool part of starting the symposium, sharing with you some of the, not only some of the information that we were able to share a couple of weeks ago in Florence. UTIP co-sponsored a global conference on human smuggling and trafficking. And, we had to choose Florence in Italy because it's just cool to go to Italy. Because everything is happening in Europe right now, right? So we put all the teams together. But what was really interesting about that experience was the fact that we had people from regions that perhaps some of you have worked with in the past, in terms of arrest and identification, but we had never been able to put all of them together in a room, as researchers. So we had people who are looking at smuggling from Afghanistan, Pakistan, within Africa, people who are exploring the flows of people. Trust me, we're going to look at some of those maps today, going from places like Senegal through Libya, which is right now becoming a huge hub for human smuggling, now that the Balkans route got closed because of some of the decisions on the EU and the Turkish government. So we're going to be sharing some of that information to start with. And because, I'm hoping that everybody had their coffee, and if you didn't, this is going to be a cool, quick section, and I'm going to be showing you a lot of maps. That, not a lot, don't panic, but and information, some images of the research that we have, that myself have conducted, as it says right here, on 5 continents. So let's just go ahead and start. So all of us, I'm sure that we have been following the news on what's happening internationally, globally, in terms of migration. So, right now, Europe, this is one of the messages. There's this ongoing crisis that is happening in Europe. We have hundreds, it creates a solution, and there's scores of people, especially from the Middle East and Africa, who are trying to reach a safer location in Europe. So in this, the people behind these processes are the smugglers, or as we know them here on the border, coyotes or polleros. And when we talk about them, we also use a very specific language. Of course, again, here on the border, los coyotes, los polleros. And if you go to Europe, some of the language that is used is also very much along the line of gender. But in the European context, it's also about religion. So we're always, we hear about the smugglers being African, or being from the Middle East, them being Arab, or, being Muslim. So these are some of the lines that we hear about the smugglers. What else do we know about them? Or how else do we hear about smugglers? And you can see from here, you may be able to see some parallels on the way we also talk about the smugglers here on the border. So they are violent predators. They are people who are taking advantage of migrants that are coming in. We talk about them as engaging, in all of this level of sexual violence or physical violence against the people that they bring across the borders. So we also see an emphasis on sexual victimization and the exploitation of women and children. That is very common to that narrative of the smuggler. Another one that you have probably heard about, especially for, if you want to raise your hand, like how many of you are practitioners, people who actually have contact or interact with smugglers at some level? Would you mind raising your hand? Okay, so thank you. So we know that a big motivation behind smuggling is the profit, money. How much are we making? How much are we bringing in? And there is, not we, but the smugglers. But then there's this notion of greed and profit. They are doing this because it's very profitable, because it really gives them, all of this cash that they can count upon. Another line of that is part of this story is that smugglers are very organized. That we're talking about transnational organized groups that are, hierarchical, that there's bosses that operate, or here on the either on the U.S. side or the Mexican side. In the European and Middle Eastern cases, we also hear a lot about people in Africa or within the Middle East that are coordinating the groups that are sending them out. And the notion or the concept that transnational organized crime is behind it is very common in the way everybody talks about smuggling. So this is what I mean when I talk about story. This is what we hear all the time. So what is human smuggling? What do we actually talk about when we say human smuggling? Who would be able to define that? Who could be able to give me a definition of what human smuggling is? Anyone? Any takers? What is human smuggling? 1, 2, okay. Let's go on to the definition. So, human smuggling, would be a series of steps. So it's not just, like as some people see it. Oh, el coyote, coyote was the one who brought the person over. Like, it's not as easy as that. So there's a series of steps. There's the coordination, there's the recruitment. So it's the series that is facilitated entirely or in part by a broker or a group of people. And they, of course, they operate on the basis of money. You pay me for this, you pay me for this transit, you pay me so much money, and then I'll get you across the border. That is another key factor. This is a person that is facilitating a trans-border crossing on behalf of another person that doesn't belong to that country, in terms of citizenship. And this is alone while evading state controls. So that is the fancy definition. I wrote here as well for a fee or in-kind payment because it doesn't always involve money. Can anybody give me examples, or is there anything else that is involved in smuggling that you have seen in the field? When they don't pay cash, what else would they pay for? Or would they pay with? Servitude? Okay. Any other examples?
Backpack.
Right. So that would be, can you expand on that? I didn't hear. Somebody already said the D word? Drugs. So that is, those are some of the things that we see. People having, for example, to spend some time at they run out of money, right? When they get to a specific point, and the smuggler tells them, hey, you can stay here, like that way I will take you to the next step. Or if not, you can carry this bag. And can you raise your hand if you have encountered the backpack model? Okay. And people who are paying off fees working or staying at the safe houses. A couple of them. Okay, so there's less of you. Okay. So these are some of the forms that we see. There's also, as you know, some payment plans that are established, or people paying, performing other kind of services. There is some indication as well, for example, that women rely on sexual services to pay off some of those fees, or to rely on that sexual capital. Another part of the definition, this is one of many forms that leads to irregular migration. And I say many forms because, we are, as people who work, the front lines know, the focus is on undocumented migrants, on aliens, coming, into the U.S. But one of the, is there any other form of migrating illegally?
Visa overstay.
Exactly, which were, for a very long time, one of the, most of the people who are undocumented actually achieved, reached that status because of that visa overstay. And again, I bring this up because usually human smuggling is what everybody sees, right? They see, we get to watch on television all the images, of Border Patrol agents, responding to the crisis, or, here on the border a couple of years ago with unaccompanied minors. So those are the images that the public, again, receives. Also this notion of trafficking, of modern day slavery that very much accompanies a lot of the representations. So one of the, this morning when we were having coffee with the chief, and one of the things that that we really wanted to emphasize was the fact that, well, we are here at UTEP, right? This is a university. But I am here at the university as a professor, but I actually started as a criminal investigator. So I worked in Maricopa County. If you have ever been to that glorious part of the state of Arizona, especially in the summer, I'm sure you will never forget that place. So I worked in pre-sentence investigations in Maricopa County for about 7 years. And initially, I was assigned to drug trafficking cases. So those were... Okay, something happened to the computer right there. I was initially assigned to drug trafficking cases, and then in 2005, I'm sure that many of you know about Sheriff Joe Arpaio. There was a shift in terms of the enforcement direction that the county was taking, and there was an anti-human trafficking law, or a law that started as an anti-human trafficking law, the Coyote law, if anybody has heard about that. Was passed. And so a lot of the investigators and people who were working the field were assigned to work on those cases. And so we started to see, work on investigations that were connected to human smuggling, kidnappings, bajadores. Anybody familiar with the bajador? The gangs, or that rob the cargo, que les bajan la carga to the smugglers. So this is where my work started. I was again spending lovely Saturday and Sunday afternoons talking to the people in detention in Arizona, primarily men and women who had been charged with human smuggling offenses, human smuggling and smuggling related offenses. At that time as well, Arizona was the main point of entry for undocumented migrants in the country. People going, from Phoenix and then taking I-10, being able to reach Salt Lake City in a relatively, short period of time. It's about 13 hours, I believe, of driving. I just did the, work on that route. And again, it was mostly looking at the operations and safe houses that I started. Those were the main cases that I was assigned to. The cases involving kidnappings, people who were found at safe houses, and I was looking at some of the recruitment strategies on the border. So my experience initially started, on the field. Of course, I cannot even aspire to say that I work right on the border. But a lot of the investigations, of course, involved working, just trying to look at some of the cases that were taking place along the reservation in the area of Ajo, in Bisbee, and all the routes, all the things that were happening in Phoenix at the time. And when I worked on those cases, I thought, well, this is only Phoenix, right? Or it's just the U.S.-Mexico border. And towards the last the end of my PhD, I started, actually was the end, I had just finished my master's, and I was about to start the PhD, when I heard it of somebody here from the State Department. Is that, no? Oh, hi, which agency are you, which?
Diplomatic Security.
Diplomatic Security. Thank you for joining us. So, the folks from the State Department actually told me, well, this sounds very similar. The work that you're doing with the smugglers sounds very similar to what we want to do in North Africa. So this was around 2008. And, I lived in Phoenix for 10 years. I had never left Phoenix, and the thought of going to North Africa sounded really exciting to me. Yeah, maybe I should go to North Africa and see how that goes, right? So I actually lived, let's see if this can be. And I went to under a great State Department program. I was able to go and look at some of the smuggling networks that were operating from the south of from the desert, this part right here, up to the north, and some of the smugglers that were operating and taking the people into Spain. So at that time, and again, we're talking about 2008, this was the main route. This was one of the main routes of, let's see, I can put this where it belongs. People were using the train system that went across Morocco to get to some of the, okay, maybe I should use this one right here, yeah. So I was based out of Fez, which is located maybe around this area right here. And then from here, people were taking, and these were people from Sub-Saharan Africa who had reached Morocco, they were getting to a town called Oktha, right here on the border with Algeria. Some of them were taking the boats along the coast. Some of them were actually going to the tip right here in Tangier, also riding boats and making it to Spain. This on the ferry, it's a 45-minute ride. You get on the ferry, you get some tea or coffee, and you're in Spain, in about 45 minutes. The boats was a, kind of a different story. They were usually crews of fishermen who were operating in the smaller villages along the coast. And they were, bringing people in small boats onto the continent, primarily to the city of Algeciras and Tarifa, and, the beaches nearby. But now, fast forward, about 8 years later, you can see the complexity of this map. And this is perhaps what many of you have been following in the news. The route around Morocco is really not useful anymore. Why would that be? Anyone? Yes?
If they've overtasked law enforcement there, if they have any, or...
There is an agreement that was established actually by the EU with Morocco that is very similar to the one that the American government has established with Mexico at stopping and controlling some of the flows. So that is one big reason. Any other reason? Does anybody know what was going on with the Spanish economy a few years ago? Yeah, it was bad. So Spain used to receive a lot of this Moroccan, sub-Saharan migration, but the economy was not that great anymore. So when, one place is not as effective, or people were not being able to receive the kind of, or to aspire for the kind of opportunities that they would want, they started to shift to another route. So here what we see is, again, sub-Saharan, this is West Africa. Mali, Senegal. And this is a route right now, this is the main route fueling irregular migrants into Europe. And what we're going to see becoming the trend. We're actually looking right now at developing a project. I've heard that some people here in the room were doing work in Africa. Is that right? Okay. But one of the projects that we're trying to get going is to look at how the smuggling enterprise is working throughout West Africa to get to Tripoli right now, and then to go on the boats to the island of Lampedusa. Has anybody heard about Lampedusa in the news? Probably heard about the boats that have been capsizing in the Mediterranean. So this is the region where those incidents are taking place. And also, what is happening in Libya? Anyone?
Chaos, turmoil.
I think that's a very nice way of putting it, right? The lack of a stable government is generating this vacuum of power that is allowing for the smugglers to prosper, to coming in and to settle. And again, this is a route that has been, that traditionally had been used by people from East Africa. But as you can see, on this map, they are not the only ones using it these days. So we're also getting people who are coming all the way from Ethiopia, Sudan, or the Horn of Africa. What is happening in those countries? They are just having, same thing, a hard time with their security at this point. So people are trying to flee. And one of the easiest routes, again, is becoming Tripoli. And we say the easiest, taking into consideration that for that they have to travel, thousands of miles, have to connect with multiple smugglers along the way that know each other or that are again connected to each other, and that who can facilitate in turn the transit into Tripoli and into Italy. So again, at this point, Spain is no longer the main point of entry. And now that the Balkans route again was closed just a couple of weeks ago, if you were following the news by the EU, we see the flow shifting into North Africa. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to smugglers as they organize in that part of the world. Let me show you another one here that shows those flows. So what happened a couple of weeks ago, actually, when we were holding the conference in Florence, I think it was that following weekend, Turkey, right here, signed an agreement with the EU not to trade refugees and to stop them from going on into Europe. So now Turkey is becoming this station where people can actually purchase or hire smuggling services. And the services are taking them again to the route of North Africa. Since they can no longer go to Greece right here, which was really just a boat ride away, they are going back. They are tracing back their steps, to Benghazi and then to Tripoli by the way of Egypt. Any questions on that before I? Yes.
Do you see the same type of, I know here in the southwest border, there's some influence by drug trafficking organizations, how they have some influence on the way the flow of immigrants go through the border. Is it the same in North Africa where there's drug smuggling groups? Is it terrorist groups? Or is it a variety?
You're getting ahead of us.
Okay.
That's, we're actually going to spend the last hour talking, in depth about where this interaction exists, or this kinds of interactions. I think for now what we can say is that they share the same routes, and they share, as we know, the same spaces. So of course there's going to be a level of interaction among them. And another project that we're looking into at this point is that exactly mapping the extent of those interactions. We'll get back to that, later on this morning. Yes, sir.
In your definition of the human smuggling, if you will, you said it's a series of steps, etc. And I'm just wondering if the subjects to be smuggled, the people who are being smuggled, do they seek the smugglers on their own, typically, or do the smuggling organizations have some sort of recruiting mechanism to just say, hey, come on in, because after all, this is business. But which is more relevant?
I would say, and I would ask for people to agree or disagree with me, that there's about you can find all forms of recruitment. So you find people who actually look for the smugglers, especially if you're really trying to get out of Kurdistan in Iraq, and we'll get to that in a second. You need to start looking for a smuggler. But then some smugglers don't have the clientele base established yet, so they go and they try to recruit people. Also, let's say that I am in the U.S. and I have relatives in Erbil, in Iraq. And I know somebody who can really get them out of there. So I can actually start the process from afar. I don't really have to be there. So there's multiple ways of recruiting the smugglers.
And the second question, very quickly, I'm just wondering if governments or corrupt governments are involved in any way, shape, or form in this smuggling operation.
What would you say about that?
Most definitely.
Let's just leave it at that for now, and then we'll go back to to look into it into more extent. Okay. So let's look really quick at another route, the one that I just made reference to. So two years ago, before coming to, I've only been in UTEP for, this is my second semester here, but before I was here, I was in Australia. And I was looking also, in Australia, I was interviewing women who had made the journey all the way from Iraq and Iran, because they are, again, very nice places to live in. So they were actually leaving this region right here. It was the region that I visited at the time was the border with Syria. So you can see this is also some space with where they share with Turkey, and this is or at least tried to be, part of Iraq and Iran. And in this case, people were actually seeking out the smugglers to get out. And they were flying with false documents to Dubai. The map moved on me here a little, but so it will be Dubai. And then using false passports, they were flying all the way to Indonesia. And then in Indonesia, they were able to recruit. But here, some of the smugglers who were also fishermen were selling their services, or the people had already connected with them at some point along the route. And here, don't think that the arrow was too short. They were actually trying to make it to Christmas Island, which is Australian territory. And starting in 2013, the Australian government decided that they were no longer able, or they were no longer going to be granting or examining refugee claims to those who arrived by boat. So starting at that point, the Australian government actually set up an agreement with a foreign government, the island of Nauru, which is located somewhere around here. It was too tiny for me to just, put a mark right in there. And that is where most of the people have been transported to. So their asylum, if you're arriving to Australia by boat, you're not going to be, your claim is not going to be, examined. And the Australian government actually set up a campaign telling people, don't come by boat, because we're not going to let you in. Do you think that this stopped people from coming? No. What did this do to smugglers?
They increased price.
They increased price. What else did they do?
Innovative.
They are very innovative. We know that. We see that every day. They change. When you close one route, another one opens. So they were using different routes to try to get to Australia, and people were still hoping, paying the fees to get there. In some of these cases, as you can see, this is not just to go from some part in Mexico to Phoenix, but look at the kinds of distances that we're looking at here. So again, looking at costs, this was significantly higher. We're looking at a journey of about $18,000 right in there. My favorite one, and I think I hope that this kind of start. Opening, some of the room for discussion. This is Latin America. This is what is happening in Latin America right now. And again, don't think that the arrows just came out of nowhere. Has anybody encountered in your day-to-day activities people crossing the border from the Middle East? Can you raise your hand just to get an idea? Africa. China, Nepal. Did I say Pakistan already? Okay. These are the new, we don't know, as researchers, we really don't know how new these routes are, but we know that people are coming in through them, especially following some of the forces are responding to some of the conflicts. So we have people from Africa and the Middle East that are riding boats, merchant ships, and flying or riding them to the coast, here primarily in Venezuela, or flying to places like Brazil, Venezuela, and Ecuador. Why would that be? Why would you fly to those three countries?
Visa waivers.
You know all the answers, Kim. I'm not going to let you. You can't answer anyway. Yes. So a visa waiver means pretty much that you don't need a visa to get there. So as long as you have a passport, or as long as you are a national of a country that does not require a visa for people from those countries, you can get in. Recently, Ecuador, realized that, oh, wait, what are all these people from China doing here? Oh, could it be that, that our visa requirements are, allowing for this transit to occur? Oh, what about all of these Cuban nationals that are showing up here? Oh, that's a very interesting question. So visa restrictions or lack thereof, or just visa policies overall, have played a role in how this flows take place. Ecuador, which as you know had a series of earthquakes just last week. is reconsidering that visa, their visa policies. They are also trying to figure out what the earthquakes are going to mean in terms of migration for their own people. Ecuadorians had a history of migration. Some of them come to the US, but they were primarily going to Europe, Spain and Italy. But at this point, it again became this, because of the visa regulations, it became a huge hub for people from Asia and Africa. From here, if you can hire a smuggler and you can travel to Panama. In Panama, you can, as Asian or African citizen of an Asian or African country, you can, and I'm going, this is very general, there's of course the individual cases, but you can file a claim for asylum and get a temporary permit. Or while your claim is being handled, a lot of the people from Africa and Asia just organize their journeys across Central America and then reach Mexico. And in Mexico, they also, again, they file new claims, and then they can, during the term that they are allowed to stay in the country, they can map journeys onto the US-Mexico border. Has anybody heard recently about Cuba? What is happening in Cuba? Anyone? Don't answer, Ken. Well, again, people are kind of worried of what's going to happen to the regime. So just maybe about a month ago, there was, I believe it was a group of 8,000, maybe wrong on that, but according to some of the journalistic reports, 8,000 Cuban nationals who were in Central America trying to get out of there. This was a group of people that received, a lot of criticism over the fact that they were allowed to travel immediately because of the relationship or the changing state of relation, the relation between the U.S. and Cuba. So they were pretty much allowed to travel to the border. Other forms of smuggling within the Caribbean, which is actually the least explored area in terms of smuggling research. There is the Haitians and Dominicans that are trying to reach U.S. territory. So many of them cross this gap right here to get to Puerto Rico. Many of them may try to, Cuba is not such a welcoming option. So another route that will be here from the Caribbean will be traveling into Mexico and then proceed in a very similar route. We're coming back to the border. We're getting there. This is something that perhaps many of you have seen. Can anybody tell me what this is other than the routes? Anyone? Has anybody heard of La Bestia? Yeah, La Bestia is everywhere, right? So as soon as we say La Bestia, everybody knows. So the migration routes across Mexico pretty much mimic the railroad, the Mexican railroad routes. And there's also a number of people who there's different demographics that rely on different routes. Who would use this route right here along the Gulf? Anyone?
People coming from Central and South America.
Exactly. It's the closest. Let me go back. It's the closest to Central America, so you just use this route. This is also the most lethal route. Why would that be? Just, the good old friends, Los Zetas, that are, just hanging out there. And so what we have seen at this point as well is a decline of Mexican irregular migration. So most of the people who are crossing the border at this point are Central American or, just using local terminology, OTMs, that are relying on this route right here. So the majority of the irregular border crossings at this point in time is taking place in this sector right here. What would be, Valley in South Texas. Again, a route that people from South America are relying upon. So I'm also showing you this map because, again, when I was working on investigations back in 2005, Arizona was the main point of entry. So we saw this shift that was connected, in part to enforcement, also from changes migration, among Mexican nationals. Where's my book? Right here.
Can you describe or explain the La Paz agreement?
La Paz Agreement?
100-kilometer border zone.
You're always asking those questions, Ken. No, this is, I think, and here I didn't cite the source for the map. I am not really, I have to look this up and so that I could give you exact information in terms of the agreement. But here, what I wanted to show was mostly, just the flows and how they have rearranged themselves. Is there can you think of any other reasons why the flows have shifted to South Texas? Yes.
Versus Arizona, there's a lot of open land, it's very difficult terrain, whereas I would imagine, this is just my theory, South Texas, you have more places to hide, metropolis cities. That's one thought.
Okay, would be the environment. Does the environment have any kind of impact on human security or human life that you're aware of? As you know, in the case of Arizona, it also used to be the most lethal, point of entry. That's where most of the border crossing fatalities were recorded. And that is actually the case at this point in South Texas. So it has shifted. But what would be, I'm more than, anything, I just want to hear your thoughts on that. Yes, sir.
Types of consequence delivery systems or prosecution strategies in Arizona compared to the lack or lack of resources or in Texas to prosecute and deliver consequences.
Thank you. The size of these counties and the ability for people to respond. Hidalgo County. If you have ever been down to that part of the valley, the size of those. There's counties where there's only 2 sheriff officers for the entire 2 or 3 officers that respond to the entire region. There's of course no mechanisms to respond effectively, no human power to do so. That's enough. And as you mentioned as well, legislation. Do I really want to risk crossing through a state where I know that the laws and regulations are not going to be that welcoming than going through Texas, where again, there may not be, or the consequences of being or going through there are not perceived, as bad.
Does NAFTA have also an effect in that area?
NAFTA, it was, it applied to the entire border region, but it actually affected, this corridor because of the maquila. Yes, sir.
Along those lines, also, it is. Has there been any research, if you will, to ascertain with some degree of measured confidence of why the shift takes place? And the reason I'm asking this because we all think that, let's say that we have consequence delivery system, that we have the terrain, we have, as you heard, several, if you will, potential causes. But I'm wondering, oftentimes we're asked, I work with border patrol, we're asked, what is the exact reason? Can you give us the exact reason? Beyond just giving opinions, if you will. Are you aware of any research that you can point me to?
In terms of what are the reasons?
To ascertain exactly what causes the shift.
One of in terms of what people believe, would be according to their personal people who are crossing the border. So we're trying to tell me. Okay, so I think that will take me to the next slide. What do we know about smuggling, right? Like how are we looking at these flows and how are they taking place? Before I even go there, let me tell you something that we're going to keep repeating this morning. There is very, very little research that has been conducted on smuggling facilitation. So everybody's talking about it, right? And you probably get tired of how, I remember getting tired in Arizona. Everybody's a border expert. Everybody knows what is happening on the border, especially in DC, right? Anybody from DC? Like, I just look at people, anybody from DC? You know, like, everybody has solutions for the border because they know how the border looks like. The truth is, we don't know. We have some statistics. Many of them are aggregated. Many of them are, again, seen from the angles of people who come to the border and go to the port of entry, and they say, everything is perfect. Everybody's working. Everybody's doing their job. Look at this equipment. Great. Let me write that. And I'll go back and write my report. And just go down to to the stretch right in between the port of entry and Anapra. Go talk to the agents. Go talk to the people who are working 18-hour shifts who can go home because they have to take over all those hours. So there's all of this. Everybody knows what is happening, but no, we really don't know. There is really very little research that has been conducted on how this is actually reflected on the ground. And we'll get that in a second. So, and here, the question would be, so how can we find out? And one of the main goals of having all of you together in this room, we recruited you, we wanted you here, we had you in mind, is actually to start a conversation with you. How can we as researchers help you address your challenges? Because if not, we are just people with fancy titles, and we are doctors here and doctors there, but we don't know anything that is happening on the ground. And that is the kind of work that we want to develop, and that is what I think the symposium the series is trying to do. How can we help you? How teach us? We don't know anything. We are really just trying to come up with ideas, and sometimes we do it through this. This is the work that I do. I do ethnographic work. So the work that I've done in these countries has involved, with spending time with smugglers, with refugees, with the people, with migrants, learning about what they do, how they do it. And if you look at this slide, this is pretty much what most of you do on an everyday basis. You are people from the community. You go and talk. Most of you, are from here, are interested in what's happening on the border, and your families, the people. You go and you talk to them and you interview them. You go to the tap. Like, I go to the tap. You tell me you go to the tap. It's John Martin's fault over there, but I get to go to the tap. So we carry out interviews. We spend time hanging out, in the community. And here, we have been here. For many of us, it's been about being on the border, spending time with the people. And here, fancy words that we like to use in academia. I use a lot of my own experience, being from a migrant family, looking at my own the history of my family, how they are here, the things that allow us to understand the experiences of others. So no more maps, sorry. But now we're going to be talking about how the groups are organized. Really, try to get through this as fast as I can so that we can have more questions. So the stories that we hear in the media, tell us one thing. How do we see them? How have we been able to document that smuggling organizations operate? According, again, to this kind of work, this kind of inquiry, social sciences. What have we learned through social science data collection? Well, we know that human smuggling organizations globally have no clear forms of long-term stability or leadership. So we have, when you have probably seen that with some of the coyotes, they have coordinators, the ones who make the calls, who make sure that the money is distributed, who go and solve disputes among everybody. But you don't see that sense of long-term stability. When we find it, we get very excited, to see, the kind of quote-unquote mom-and-pop enterprises that probably started in the past and that expanded to become really good, really well-developed groups that are bringing in the people. Some of these coordinators are women, if you have run into them. We've also been able to find out that smugglers work on an as-needed occasional basis. They are very much known to each other, although, and this is something that I was able to document a lot of the time in Arizona, that they offer, as somebody was mentioning earlier, money to the migrants. My driver didn't show up, because it always happens, right? Like your cousin, your uncle didn't show up because the car broke down. But you have this guy right here who looks really bright. Like, you can drive, right? And the guy goes like, I'll give you $500 off your price if you drive this group. And you go, $500? Jeez, like, I'll do it. So there's a lot of that informal, on-the-spot kind of recruitment. And which is connected tasks are very defined. You're not going to find one coyote, one pollero that does everything. One does the driving, another one collects the money, another one goes and feeds the people, another one, we have the guides, we have the ones that do it on the cell phone. We have very, well-defined tasks. And this level of connection is still very much trust-based. If you remember this question from your pretest, don't tell the chief, but this is one of the answers. Smuggler profiles. Is there a smuggler profile? What do you guys think? Anyone? There is a smuggler profile. Raise your hand. There is no profile. Okay, everybody, let's work. So, and we can say, that there are some general characteristics that we're going to find. But we can be, you can see, you've seen this at work. You can find a little abuelita, right? You can find a little grandma. They go like, this little old lady, she's 88 and she's bringing all these people. And then you're also you're probably running into, little girls, little boys that are guiding groups. So there's really not a specific profile. They are at the same. We could potentially characterize them as ordinary citizens. Many of them, and here I'm talking about globally, have good intentions. And here I know some of you are kind of excited, but you're right. They're going to tell me that there's good coyotes. Like when you talk to people and they tell you that there's some, you start to like, okay, what's going on here? So what we see is that most of the coyotes, most of the smugglers, and it's funny for me to call all of them coyotes or smugglers, but having lived in all of these countries, but the majority are men. There's women. What would be the difference between a male smuggler and a female smuggler? Anyone? You have seen that in the field? Females are what? What do you mean? Who said that? Who said that? Like, oh, okay, come right here and I'll show you. Like so, no, usually women have deeper ties to the communities where they work. Maybe, as you say, what would you define as worse? Now that you made me think.
From my experience, female smugglers have been more ruthless, more violent, more controlling of the people that are smuggling.
How do you define that? That's important.
Ruthless, vicious.
How? Les pegan. Like, what did they do? Give me specific behavior.
Like they have something to prove that they can do.
More than. So, because this is it's a male-dominated occupation. Who has, as we have seen in the field, it's mostly men. I've interviewed some smugglers that say, I'm going to say this in Spanish, las viejas hacen todo. The old ladies do everything. Like, pero nosotros somos los que nos agarran. But it's us, the ones, who get caught. So we don't know, that's another aspect that we need to explore. What are women doing and how are they doing it? What do we know, at this point? Yes, sir.
From my experiences, especially tied to the ports of entry, females are a bigger player than people. And I've even seen groups that were all female. There were no males involved in this moment. So,
can I give you my card at the end of the summer so that we can talk about them? In fact, I'll make a brief, commercial here. I wrote a paper on some of my interactions with female smugglers, and the ones that specialized in bringing children. So, and again, they market this idea of protection, like you don't have to, you pay me twice or 3 times the fee, but your child is going to be super safe. And this is primarily women. You don't see a lot of, of men that will be involved. Or, coyotes, polleros that only bring in pregnant women. Like I don't bring children, I don't bring men, that are very specialized in terms of their work. That was also the case in Australia, but they would only bring women with them.
Aren't you missing the third group here with the exploitation of the juveniles? Because traditionally the system looks at the juvenile as catching these, kick them back, and they use those as guides, and the more likely areas where they're going to get caught and interacting with law enforcement. Shouldn't you also be looking at juveniles?
We're talking about women right now. No, that is a very important, and I think that's another point. So tomorrow there's, I'm not marketing that event, but tomorrow there is a gathering right here of researchers that are looking at what are some of the gaps. There is, in this case I know for a fact, there is absolutely no research conducted on the juveniles that are bringing in drugs or people. There is no research. So if anybody is interested on, bringing us on board and helping us figure this out, again, we have a box full of cards, because this is what you guys are dealing with right now. The juveniles that are bringing in people. We were just talking to a couple of agents, and they were, and this is not just recently, but they are reporting dealing with children as young as 5 or 7 that are bringing groups, 3 or 4 in the morning. Like, what do we do? So this is, again, another part that we can, as researchers, help you with, that we want to be part of. Yes, sir.
This is just a little bit of digression. I'm an academician myself. I joined Border Patrol about 3 years ago, and as an academician from the outside, if you will, before I joined this great organization, I would have thought exactly, my thought process would be very, very predictable as if you will, a researcher from the outside. Now, how do you engage, how do you help us help you? You say that, and I appreciate that very much. There is, for whatever it's worth, in my view, there is a group of academicians, highly educated, very well, et cetera, you know that. But they're so incredibly connected, and it's like a cult of thinking.
It is a cult.
So yeah, it is indeed,
Yes.
and I would argue with that. But the point is, they have their ways, old ways of thinking that it is so hard to crack, if you will. Despite my screaming to them and saying, like, for example, the SP-shaped model, if you're familiar with any of that, and other many things that have been established back in 1995, the same still process. Still, they would produce a 600-page document of great research for $2 million, and they'll say nothing new. So I would encourage you as a researcher, and if there's anything that I can help or my organization can help, trust me, by engaging the people, for example, he just raised a point about, hey, look, let's talk to agents. Let's talk. Did you consider the UACs, for example? To bring in new thoughts.
And let's talk about this right now. Let me get through these slides, and then we'll talk about that, because that is part actually of the conversation that we wanted to have with all of you at the end of the last session. But we're definitely going back to that, I promise you. Really quick, because we want to take a couple of questions. As I mentioned, migrants and refugees themselves, often people in transit trying to pay off their fees. People who are, and here the last two are in reference to people who are arrested already, at the destination points. This is data from my research in Phoenix. The majority of them are employed, and here I'm talking about smugglers, and have no criminal record. I've heard from agents working right here in right here in La Linea that most of the people that you do come in contact with do have a criminal record. So it would be, another thing that will be interesting to explore. Really quick, this was one of them, talking about ethnography. This was and quick, story. I used to go to this beauty salon in Phoenix. I went there for years. And it was only, years later that I found out that the lady who cut my hair was a coordinator. I felt like, oh, I was, and she was very proud of the fact that she was connecting people, with the community.
So on the previous
Going
slide,
back
say
to-
that you made no ties to TCOs. Why do you say that?
There is no evidence, no specific evidence of solid ties to transnational criminal organizations. And we will talk more about this with more detail, and this is the second presentation.
Interesting, because you can't function in a location without paying your dues.
Which is, kind of what I mentioned earlier. We have there is a wide range of interactions, but does that mean collaboration? When I pay my piso, which is, what would be here on the border. And I pay, cuando le pagan a la mafia, when they give the specific fee that has the cut that goes for them. Is it the same kind as when they get the call, you can bring the people in this week, you can use this route? Or when somebody, when a migrant, him or herself, goes and approach an organization, or a guy. Or when the one that is bringing the marijuana bales into Phoenix tells you, there's room for you in my plane, don't worry, I'll fit you in. So that is what we mean, that we as researchers, we're trying to look at what are the kinds of interactions and what are the implications of those interactions.
I have a question.
Sure.
On your research, how outdated is this research?
So, this is...
And not to be disrespectful, because
No.
we're starting to see it. I mean, you were there in Phoenix in 1998, and now we're there.
Oh, no, 2011.
2005. But we're starting to see a shift
Of course.
to women and the routes of travel, and that's why I'm asking about, how recent this research is, because you're drawing some brows here that are kind of don't
Yes.
with some of the stuff that you're saying. So.
Let me tell you something that is very important for me to raise, and I should have brought this up earlier. We cannot assume that all markets are going to operate the same. And I'm sure that you have seen that for some of you who have worked in other sectors. Like right now in Phoenix, there's people that are coming through Phoenix, but like this lady had to open another salon. So, or there's again routes that are no longer being used, or people. If you go down to Tamaulipas, if you go down to the little sector on the little square, a lot of the coyotes are no longer going back to the piso. They are like, it's not worth it for me to do this anymore. I've been doing this for 20, 30 years, but now I need to pay the narcos. I need to bribe all the local officers. I need to do all of this. At the end of the day, I have no money left. So we're looking at different markets. We cannot make and these are very general observations that we've made on other organizations. It's not a case study by any any means. But so this is what we see of some of them.
So
Yes, sir.
You keep referencing that you interview these people, you talk to these people. What's your methodology on this, right? Because you said you talked to folks in Australia. Is that at detention centers? You said you talked to coyotes here and there.
Oh, sure.
How are you collecting that data? I know where I get my intelligence and all that from. Where are you guys getting it? I know one of them you referenced The Economist as one of your sources. So can you talk a little bit about where you're kind of, because as you're saying, I mean, the conclusions, generally there are some that, we agree with, some we probably don't, but where are you drawing this from?
Okay, so going back, I really didn't want to bombard you with methodology. As I said, I'm an anthropologist, so the research that I conducted initially with the smugglers in Maricopa County was my doctoral dissertation. So I quit my position with Maricopa County, and to start a PhD. I collected data involving 66 prosecutions. Actually, I'm sorry, it was 45 cases and 66 interviews conducted with men and female smugglers. I had 12 female in my samples, 12 women, the rest were men. And this were, again, looking at the cases and correlating the data from the prosecutions with the face-to-face interviews. The research went on from 2009 to 2011. The specific work with them at the point again where the market had reached a high. in terms of, methodology. There's questionnaires, there's surveys. There's also, all the qualitative data analysis that, that looks, I look primarily at the kinds of interactions and nodes where they connect and how they relate to each other in the process.
But is your population an incarcerated population?
It included, people who had been in custody in the past, people who had been released from custody, and local people. And that is, as some of you know, because the practice of smuggling, those coyotes, they operate within the community. So it was, again, this woman, that's why I brought her up in this case. She had been cutting my hair for all of those years. So this also shows you, especially for those of us who have lived on the border, have relatives on the border, have that experience, we can be, our cousin can be, again, on the border patrol, and then we have this guy that we went to school with who has been bringing in drugs or people for many years. So this dynamic that occurs along the border also allows for this kind of research. I know what we are, kind of running out of time, and I think I already bombarded you with information. So let's see, let me see if there's anything. Oh, it's right here. So let me go back to over here too, to the economics, because this is some of the, again, none of this information is intended to represent all markets, all smugglers. These are generalizations that come from empirical research, not only mine, but the work that has been completed by multiple researchers, by a small community of researchers, though I have to say. Not a lot of people conduct research with on smuggling organizations. Most smugglers are, they have jobs. Most of the people, let me rephrase this. Most of the people who are convicted for smuggling offenses tend to have other jobs. And that is because the specific returns that they get are not very high. We only look at the fee, at what people pay for a crossing. It's only, that will be one way of looking at it. But think about how many people have to share that fee and how that trickles down into the economy. So especially in the case of women, what they get is immediately recirculated. They have to buy uniforms, they have to buy milk, they have to put gas in the cars. So women would get paid, just a little bit of money to do some of these transactions. I mentioned this earlier, how prices are dependent on distance and the kind of service. And, my favorite one that I've seen over the years, that math is not necessarily the forte of a lot of the smugglers. If you have listened to them talk, you're like, son tres por uno y dos por el otro son cuatro, right? 3 plus 2 are like 4, and the other one goes, sí, güey, sí. So this also allows many times for a lot of, temporary conflict among the people that participate. Well, the chief is already here, and you're not supposed to see the answers to the slide here, to the questions in the post-test. These are, again, the observations that we can make. That across the globe, human smuggling organizations are grouped in multiple ways. There is, again, not a specific model, not a specific profile, but what we do see is that they depend on, groups of friends and family, and many times are supported by the people that they assist. They share a few characteristics, but there is really no specific, we can narrow down a profile. And here, very few people, and you have seen this, in your interactions, very few are going to get the big bucks from, the big return from these transits. And the majority of the income for those who participate, for the lady who brings the food, to the guy who carries the water, who are making, $50, $100. So most of this income just gets immediately recycled. And again, and we'll talk a little bit more about, the motivational aspect of smuggling. So make sure that you look at your post-test. Don't tell the chief that I told you that. And I think we have maybe about time for 1 or 2 questions before we break. Can we go to break? I know that we answered a ton of them, but yeah, go ahead.
the situation in Australia as far as the asylum cases, the difference between how Australia handles their asylum cases versus the US? You mentioned that they said, hey, anybody coming over by boat, we're not going to process your case. But what happens to the people? Are they being sent back or are they being detained?
They are being kept in custody. They cannot be sent back to Afghanistan or Pakistan. But let me go back real quick. So they are being placed at this facility, Nauru. I think, is it Papua New Guinea, just less than 48 hours ago, found that kind of placement unconstitutional. So it's likely that something is going to have to happen with the detainees. At this point, they are all being housed there, and that includes, women and children.
How is that any different than how we have the website right foot process with the Cuban?
Well, you let them in, and you can, you in specific. So we allow them in, and we grant them protections and provisions. In this case, they are not granted any kind of protection or provision. They are legally detained.
So they wait for them at the landfall, and when they make landfall, then they...
Oh, so I'm sorry, that's more specific in that case. No, they don't get to the land. They usually the Coast Guard goes and meets with the boats. And then from there, they bring them onto the boats. And then they process them in Christmas Island, and from Christmas Island, they get transported to Nauru. Okay, so let's go grab some coffee.